welcome all of you here. So it's really good out there. So you being here tells me that this is something really important to you. So thank you for that. So we really appreciate on behalf of the human rights community, Birmingham Islamic Society, and the MSA here at UAB, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for being here. So this is really important. I would also like to remind you that this has nothing to do with politics or what we're going to talk about. This is more important on humanitarian grounds for kids, and Michelle will tell you that we're really proud being a part of that. We're extremely proud that we have a hometown girl, so as to say that she is from Homewood here, and Sister Anna was going to introduce her more, but we're really proud that she's come back and she has been affiliated with this cause for a long time. You will hear more from her. And we're really proud that she has taken this time to join us despite her busy schedule. She's here today in marriage. But she has taken some time out to kind of give us one-on-one as to what she has seen, so that she gives us a broader picture of what it is really like. We don't really get a bigger picture from the media and all that, so this is a first-hand account of what it actually is like in those refugee camps. So we will know more. And also, as Michelle tells me, but I really don't believe her. She says she's not a good speaker, but I don't trust her. She wants this to be more of a discussion rather than a lecture. So feel free to have questions, discussions, and I think Michelle is going to also tell us how we all can get involved with this important project, not only for the Syrian kids, but kids in general, wherever they are in the future. So please have an open ear, an open heart, because we did mention on those flyers, if you get a chance to look through it, that she's here also to collect small donations, if you may ask what, toothpaste and toothbrushes for those kids. That's how important this is. So please have an open heart and open ear to what she says, and kindly pay attention to as to how we can all get involved. So without any further delay, I would like to introduce Sister Anna. She's our young, budding volunteer here, and do justice to Michelle's bio, because I didn't say all of it. So Anna, please. Thank you.
I'd first like to introduce our first speaker today, who is Dr. Karasi. Dr. Mullet Karasi is a practicing endocrinologist here in Birmingham. He practices at Baptist Princeton, and he's a very active member of the Birmingham Islamic Society. He's from Aleppo, which is a city that's been devastated in Syria, and today he's going to talk about his experiences and his family's experiences in Syria during the uprising. Thank you.
I was told to keep it brief and for 5 minutes, so pray for me. I would like to thank the organizers of this event and everyone who took the time to come here tonight to share the moment with us. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk briefly about the situation in Syria from a Syrian American perspective. I was born in Aleppo, the second largest city of Syria. Aleppo once was the home of almost 5 million people. Now, only a small portion of this city is occupied or housed by people. The majority of the people of Aleppo, where, as I said, I came from, are now either in Turkey or somewhere else in the world, but the unfortunate ones are on the borders of Syrian-Turkish, or on the Syrian-Turkish borders in tents, and some of them do not have even tents to cover their heads. So the situation over there, as we all know, is devastating. The war now is entering the 5th year. As a matter of fact, yesterday was the anniversary, the 5th anniversary of the war. It started as a demonstration when people wanted some changes, some freedom, and unfortunately is escalated into what we now know is a major war, government against free army, and now we heard about ISIS. Unfortunately, the country now is living in a state of chaos. Our hearts are really with the innocent people like me and you, who wants just to wake up in the morning, go to work, and earn a living, and come home at the end of the day, feed their children, take care of their family, and just live a normal life, live the basic life that every human being dreamed to live in. This is not the situation now in Syria. I'm a member of a 10-people family. My mom is 87, my father is deceased. She's now in Turkey. She's living with my sister, and she always cries. She wants to go back to her home, and she has a little plant outside, and she talks about her plants, and she does not know exactly what's going on. And we really try not to tell her at this age what is going on, that our house is probably gone. So I was told actually a year and a half ago that 57% of the city is demolished, is flat. This city once was one of the most beautiful cities. Syria is not a desert like a lot of people think. Syria is a small country of the size of maybe Alabama that sits on the Mediterranean Sea. And the strip that is on the Mediterranean Sea housed the most Syrians. So about 15 million people live on that strip. And this part of the country is so beautiful. It's mountainous, valleys, parks, a lot of green, a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables. There's no fruit that I've seen in the United States that I have not seen in Syria. Very rich country, industrial, trade, very active people, very, very civilized people. You know, civilization probably started from that part of the world. We all know about the ancient Romans and Jesus and the people who walked on this. So this part of the world is really holy, not just for Muslims, it's holy for Christians and for Jews. And it should be really dear to us, and we really should always think of those people and do whatever we can to help them out. The best way we can do is to really help them, extend our hands through legitimate organizations that are working on the ground to help those people, especially children. Now people are fed with are fed with grass. People are eating grass. People are eating dogs and cats in Syria. People are leaving their houses not knowing they're going to come back safe or come back intact or ever come back. They're going to be killed and not know why they're killed and who killed them. Nobody to defend them, nobody to talk about them, their history. Unfortunately, the focus of the world is about the terrorist organization of ISIS. And I'm glad someone is taking care of it, but there are a lot of other issues that needs to be addressed about the Syrian people. And with this, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about this situation. And God bless you all.
Thank you, Dr. Karasi. I now would like to introduce our main speaker today, Michelle Everson. Michelle Everson is a 2007 graduate of Homewood High School and a 2012 graduate of the University of Pittsburgh, where she received a research degree in international conflict resolution, French and Chinese. Her research on the conflict in Northern Ireland focused on mediation efforts that led to the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998 and relied on in-person interviews with politicians and former members of the paramilitary organizations in Belfast. Since 2013, Michelle has been the Assistant Manager for Research and Operations at the Center for World Religions, Diplomacy and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution. In this position, she administers the center's travel classes in Turkey, the Balkans, and Israel-Palestine, and manages grant programs focused on training nonviolent Syrian activists in conflict resolution, negotiation, and civil society building. Michelle also volunteers with Project Ummul Salam, a grassroots organization that seeks to empower Syria's future generations through educational and psychosocial support. Michelle's work with Project Ummul Salam has taken her to refugee areas in Turkey and Lebanon to implement workshops for Syrian children aged 5 through 15. And now, without further ado, get the
I'm not a great projector, so if y'all can't hear me, just let me know and I'll try to speak a bit louder. So I'm going to be talking about Project Ummul and also the title I've given the presentation is 5 Things I Learned Working with Syrian Refugees in Turkey and Lebanon. And I'm actually going to be leaving in a couple of days for Jordan, and the kind of workshops that I'll talk about here is what we're going to be doing over the next week and a half in Jordan. But I was curious, how many of y'all are UAB students? What kind of stuff are you studying? Anybody? Chemistry, okay. Sociology, okay. Poli-sci or international relations or anything like that? Okay. So if y'all have any questions about y'all have any questions about getting into this kind of work, I can also later talk about my background and what I did and how I ended up in Washington, D.C. working where I work now. But basically, so what I want to start off with is I traveled to Turkey last year twice, in March and again in August. In August, I was also in Lebanon. And so, I'm going to bring up the map real quick so I can see it. So when we go, my colleagues and I, we travel to the Syrian border of Turkey. So we start in Istanbul, then we go down to Gaziantep, and these are graduate courses that we lead with graduate students from George Mason University's School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution. So the students we take, where they're all getting their master's degree in conflict resolution. And we start off in Gaziantep, and we visit schools there, and when we do that, we're working with Project Salam, which is the organization I'm also affiliated with. And it was founded by my colleague, Nusha Kabawat, because she went into the refugee camps here in southern Turkey, and she also traveled to the Atmane refugee camp, which is in northern Syria, back in March 2013, and she realized that the kids there, a lot of them weren't in school. They had a lot of social issues, and their needs weren't being addressed, and she founded this organization to address those needs. So we go with the students at Project Salam, which we work with kids in Gaziantep. We travel to Reyhanla, which is right here close to the border. We go like right here on the other side of the mountains from Syria. We go to an orphanage and rehabilitation center there. And then we travel to Hatay, and then the other school that we work with is right around here in its little town called Refugee. And as you can see, this is Syria right here. So the people that we're working with, they cross the border from Syria into Turkey, and a lot of them are still right around here. And then in Lebanon, we go to this area. So that in the north, it's close to Aleppo and Idlib. And then down here we go to Zapleh, and then the other cities are Shapura and another one. They're close to, they're the refugees who came from Damascus. And they cross the border and they're in the Bekaa Valley. And one thing that we've noticed is that the kids, a lot of them aren't in school, and a lot of the schools look like this. And the kids who are in these kind of schools, they're lucky because they have a classroom to go to. But as you can see, there's nothing on the walls. There's no artwork or posters or anything like that. And the desks are old. And this area is actually, it's Kuwait, and these two women who founded the school did so because the kids there weren't getting an education. And so they started the school that houses about maybe 60 or 70 kids now, and we go there and we work with the kids. However, there are so many kids in other remote areas who aren't able to go to school at all. And so we're able to support this school, but there are a lot of kids in southern Turkey, in Lebanon, also still in Syria, who don't have a school to go to because either their school is destroyed if they're still in Syria, or if they're in the refugee areas. If they're not in a UN refugee camp, then they don't have access to those services. So the kids who live here, it's about, I have a picture. It's in this area, which is outside of Hatay, and it takes us about an hour to get there. You go up and around and down the mountains, and basically as far out as you can get, as far as we can get to Syria without going inside. And this is, it's not in this picture, but when you're at the school, we're kind of on the side of a mountain, and you can look down into the valley, and there's this green watchtower, and that watchtower is the border crossing into Syria. And it's so far away from the big cities that the people there, they're all Syrians, they all speak Arabic, they don't have any interaction with the Turks in the region. And for the most part, this little enclave really wasn't known to anyone. But my colleague who I work with, she's Syrian, and she has the connections to find the schools that no one else knows about, no one else is going to. And that's really our focus, because people, when they want to donate money, often will donate money to the UN, which is great, because the UN doesn't have enough resources to do what it's doing. and money is definitely needed there, but those are the refugees in almost the best situations, the people who are in the UN refugee camps. Especially in Turkey. Turkey has been fantastic, and they said that they'll take anyone who comes across the border. They haven't set a limit on the number of refugees who they want to help. And the refugee camps in Turkey are definitely the best ones of the whole region. And the three main countries that are receiving refugees are Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon. But in Turkey, the people there don't speak Arabic, they speak Turkish. And so you have Turkish guards and Turkish police and Turkish aid workers who are administering the camp, and they can't communicate with the Syrians there because the Syrians speak Arabic. And so that's led to a lot of problems. But at the same time, those refugee camps, they have access to services that the people that we work with don't. So that's why we try to focus on refugee areas where people, they're just there by themselves and almost no one knows about them, and no one is bringing aid and workshops like what we run to them. This is another school, just to give you another sense of the kind of places we go. This is in Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. And again, it's very bare bones building. The walls are bare, the windows are open to the air, there's no glass. Definitely no heat or air conditioning, I was there last August, it was really hot. Over the winter, the whole region has gotten snow. I was in Jerusalem and Jordan in January, and there were inches of snow on the ground. And there were Syrians in Jordan, Lebanon, inside Syria, who didn't have heat, they didn't have blankets, they didn't have warm clothes, and there were little children freezing to death. And this is a school that's used year-round. It's similar on the topic of education being neglected. This is a school in Turkey. It's outside of Gaziantep. You can kind of see the kids have school uniforms. They're definitely much better off than other places I've been. But they're only able to use their school for 3 hours in the afternoon because it's a Turkish school. And so the Turks have it in the morning, and then they leave, and then from 2 to 5 p.m., these kids are able to come in, and they're all Syrian, they have Syrian teachers, and they're supported by an organization I can't remember the name of. But they have the school supplies they need, they have uniforms, they have qualified teachers, but they only get 3 hours a day of instruction. And many of them were out of school for a good amount of time, either because they were in Syria and their school was destroyed, or it wasn't safe for them to go to school, or because they came to Turkey and there was a period of several months before they actually went into this school. So the teachers are having to address that, and they only have 3 hours a day to do it. They're trying to fit what could be a 7-hour day of instruction into 3 hours. And so they definitely don't have extracurriculars. They don't have sports or art or anything like that. And so when we went there and we ran art workshops and we did sports with them, and that was the first time that since they had come to this school, that they had any of that in an organized environment. And they had people coming and wanting to do art, helping the kids do sports. We taught them Red Rover, stuff like that. And so even the children who are in school, either it's not a good school or they have a limited amount of time in school, and they've maybe missed, there are kids who are 8 years old who were 4 when the revolution started, and they could have missed several years of school in between. They're not even at the level academically that they need to be at. And then the second thing I want to talk about is that there are kids suffering from PTSD, which I think isn't a surprise when you're talking about a war. You can't quite see, but this little boy has down his left cheek. He's got scars all down there from burns, and third-degree burn scars onto his chest and down one of his arms. And then this is a little girl in Beirut, or in Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, and you can kind of see that her right eye on this side, she lost the vision in that when her parents were killed, and I think the roof collapsed in, and when that happened, she lost the vision in her eye. I was talking to one of my Syrian friends, and I was saying, oh my gosh, look at these kids, they have so many scars. You can only imagine what it was that caused that. And she said, that's the skin, you can only imagine the soul. And that's kind of what stayed with me, is that these kids are going to be, they're encountering the issues that the soldiers have when they come back from war, that they've seen such trauma, they've experienced such trauma, and they don't have any kind of resources to deal with it. And these 4 kids, this is at a school that we went to in Yaylada in southern Turkey. And we spent the day there, and I was talking to my colleagues who speak Arabic, because I speak very little Arabic. And we had all kind of noticed that the kids, like there was something off about them. And I thought, okay, it's just another case of, I pronounced something wrong. I'm just having a hard time communicating with these kids. And my colleague Nusha was almost in tears because she could tell there was something wrong with these children. For example, we were doing music and we do a beat, and then we asked the kids to repeat the beat. And it was like there were 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds who couldn't do that. And it was very clear that there were certain developmental milestones that maybe an elementary school teacher would recognize that these kids obviously hadn't met. And we found out afterwards that they're from a village in Syria called Al-Baida, and it means the white village. And there's a report that Channel 4 in the UK did where they talked about this, and the quote they used is this girl says, "It used to be called Al-Baida, the white village. Now they call it Al-Sada, the black village." And when this was written back in 2013, it was cited as the single worst documented instance of killing of civilians. And what happened was that in this village, it was a rebel, a village that supported the revolution, and it was in an area that was largely supporting the regime. And it became known that there were probably 2 rebel soldiers in the village, and so the government security forces entered, and they were looking for the 2 fighters, and they spent all day interrogating everyone. In the meantime, the fighters escaped. And at the point that the soldiers verified that those guys weren't in the village anymore, was as a way of punishing the citizens there who had harbored them, they rounded a lot of people up and they started hacking them to death. And they put them in houses and they would torch the houses. And then the article that reports on it, they talk about a woman who was able to identify her son's burned body by where he had stubbed his toe the day before. And she knew that, but that was all that she could see of his body because he'd been, a lot of them were shot before they were burned. And so after we left this school, and one of my colleagues was talking to one of the mothers there, and she said, "You know that these kids are from Al-Baida?" And she said, yeah, a lot of them did see the stuff that happened in that town, and that's what caused them to flee. And ever since then, this was the little girl that I had played with that day, and ever since then, the thing that's always been on my mind was, is she one of the ones who saw it, and how many of those kids were one of the ones who saw people killed in front of them? And that's just a small snapshot of the kind of trauma that so many Syrian children have experienced. And it's not always that graphic, but if you can imagine what it takes to flee your home and get into another country, and who knows how many days it took, and how difficult the journey was, and what you saw on the way, and how many family members were lost. There was another girl who, or there was a father that my boss was talking to, and the guy said, yeah, we left our city in northern Syria, and it was just being too dangerous, and it was me and my wife and our 9 kids, and we left and we went to a relative's home somewhere a couple of villages over, and it was attacked, and the building was attacked, and I think the walls fell in, and it killed a couple of their children. And then they left and they went to a family friend's home, and that was a bit closer to the border. And then on the way, I think it was like a barrel bomb hit them, and more of the kids and the wife died. And in the end, it was just a man and one of his daughters who had lost a leg and another child, and they were the ones who finally made it into Turkey. So you can imagine the kind of trauma that these children have been witness to and have also sustained, and they're suffering from PTSD. It's a very high percentage of Syrian kids, not just refugees, but the ones still in Syria, who have been documented showing symptoms of PTSD, and there's almost no resources to do anything about it. And then the last numbers 3 and 4 are that many refugees are not counted, and many refugees are still in Syria. It's estimated right now that there's about 9 million people who have been displaced by the Syrian conflict. Of those, about 6.5 are still in Syria. So when we talk about refugees, we're actually not talking about those people. They're called IDPs, internally displaced persons. And they're still in Syria, but they've been forced to flee their homes. They might live in an IDP camp. For example, the Atme camp in northern Syria is this huge camp, and the people living there are very close to the border into Turkey, but they've ended up still staying in Syria. So the refugee services that are being provided to refugees don't even reach those people. Apart from that, many refugees are not counted because official refugees are ones that register with the United Nations Refugee Agency. So, like I said, we try to work with people who haven't done that. They haven't made it into the camps. They're not registered and official. They're refugees who have somehow found a village that they can live in. Or if the upper class or middle class families some of them have been able to make it to Istanbul. And maybe they have a pretty nice apartment in Istanbul, and there's refugee schools there as well. So it includes people who aren't refugees or aren't living in UN camps because they don't have to be, but also people who couldn't access them or didn't want to for some reason. And in Turkey, at least, the reason that someone might not want to go into a camp, as I described earlier, is that a lot of the Turkish refugee camps have been reported to feel like a prison. Because they are so large and they have so many people they have to control that they don't let people leave. Once you're in the camp, you have to get permission to leave. You can't go out on your own. They're also prohibited from working. They're having everything given to them, and a lot of people feel like they've lost their individual agency to be able to provide for their families because everything is coming from the UN Refugee Agency. And that kind of goes into the whole field of refugee studies. But basically, there's the UN camps in Turkey are good, but are not always the most comfortable places for the Syrian refugees. And a lot of them have actually left the camps and gone back into Syria because they were so unhappy there. And then additionally, there are other people who just might not be able to get in, or they weren't in an area that had a camp, and so they've kind of settled where they could. There's just a few more pictures. So then, of the 5 things I learned in refugee camps, the last one is that there is hope. And that's because there are organizations like the one I work with, which is Project Mal-Salam, that are trying to do something about this. So I mentioned that these children have sustained immeasurable trauma. And also they feel abandoned and they're not in school, and there's all these different issues that we wanted to address. And so what Project Mal-Salam does is that we fund schools throughout the year. So we have a school in northern Jordan that we're the sole funder, and if it weren't for us, the school was about to close down last September because they didn't have anyone supporting them. The man who's the principal was essentially trying to run the school out of his own apartment, and he just couldn't do it anymore. He got in touch with Nusha, who's the director of this organization, because he remembered that we had gone to Jordan last March and we'd worked with the students, and he said, I just want to let you know, we don't know what to do, we're having to close down. She said, that's what we're here for. And so we're now fully funding that school. We pay the rent on the building, we pay the teachers' salaries, we pay for the students' books and lunches and school supplies and stuff like that. And so that's part of the work. In addition to that, we have other schools that we support on an as-needed basis, and those schools are in southern Turkey, Jordan, and then a couple of schools inside Syria as well. And then we run kind of short-term workshops, maybe if someone happens to be in the Zatri camp, then we'll have like a very short day-long workshop. But then the other component of the work is that twice a year we go to refugee areas and we have volunteers coming from all over the world. So, I'm flying in from the US, and then I have friends coming in from Canada, people from Belgium, Switzerland, France, the UAE, a lot of places around the Arab world, Syrians who are displaced and living in Lebanon or living in Jordan. One woman's actually coming from Syria. And so we get together and we run these, essentially like a day camp, like a summer camp for the kids.
These kids with their parents, or they're just kids, so nobody knows where their parents are?
For the most part, yeah, their parents are there. They live with their parents. And so we'll do day-long workshops with these children. We work with as many kids as we can. We'll have huge groups. It'll be me and an Arabic speaker, and then maybe up to 50 or 60 children. So back in Lebanon last fall, I had 60 kids aged 5, and it was me and someone who spoke Arabic, and that was our group for the day. And the reason we do that is because we want to reach as many kids as possible. So if we go to a school and it has 250 kids, we'll take them. If we have 300 kids, we'll take them. And so we do different workshops in a different school every day. And so this is from the Becca Valley last summer. And we do art workshops. So this is Nusha, the director of the program. And we do 2 different art workshops. One of them is called Peace Flags, where we tell the kids to just draw their favorite thing. And sometimes it's swearing, sometimes it's a tree. They'll want to draw like the beach. Everyone wants to go back to the beach. And it's draw your favorite thing, like what do you want your flag to be? And we put those up. And then the other one we do is called the Rebuild Your Town Workshop. And so we talk to the kids and say, okay, so, we live in Lebanon right now, but are we from Lebanon? They say, no, we're from Syria. And we say, okay, and so are we going to go back to Syria? And like, yeah, someday we're going to go back to Syria. And we tell them, all right, when we go back to Syria, it's going to be really different from what it looked like last time. And so it's going to be up to you to be the ones who are, rebuilding your communities, and what are we going to need. And so that way we have discussions about like, oh, we're going to need a hospital and a school and a library and a church and a mosque. And so they put together these buildings to represent what they've identified are the important things that they're going to need. And then at the end we have a ton of these all put together, and it's our map of the Syria that we're going to rebuild. And then another workshop is the sports workshop we do, which is mainly we do tug of rope. We don't call it tug of war, tug of rope. We taught them Red Rover last year. We'll do various soccer games just to give the kids a chance to run around, to learn about teamwork and working together. And like I said, for a lot of them, this is the first chance that they've had to do sports in an organized environment. When we do the art, it's the first time that someone is handing them markers and colored paper and stickers to work with. We also have a photography workshop. We've been really fortunate to have a few National Geographic photographers come work with us. And so we collect all the digital cameras we can get donated, and then we use them mainly for the older kids to talk about perspective and depth and framing, and actually give them a lesson in that, and then ask them to go out and photograph what they see. And sometimes it's some really amazing photos that come back, and stuff that we've been walking around this school or this neighborhood all day long, and then they capture something completely different, or they take pictures of each other. Then for the younger kids, it's more just exciting for them to be able to, hold a digital camera, use a digital camera, see how it works, and then know that they're trusted to use those. And then we also do a team building and trust building workshop, which I don't really have any pictures of. But if any of y'all have gone to summer camp, you know what, like we do the trust balls and all that kind of stuff. And that's also to teach them about teamwork and trusting one another. And at the end of the day, we give them goodie bags so that they can remember the experience. They've got tote bags. And we put in coloring books, markers, a few other things. And then this time we're actually going to be including toothbrush and toothpaste. Because when we were in southern Turkey and in Lebanon last summer, one of the things we noticed was that the kids' teeth were just really awful. And we would be, it's super hot outside. I thought I knew heat from Alabama, but then I got to Lebanon in August, and that was something else. It was hot and humid, and we're outside all day long. No air conditioning, no fans, nothing like that. And the kids are getting really dehydrated, so we'd be doing water breaks, like every 15 minutes. Which is like the massive jugs of water and no cups, because it gets messy with the cups. And so I'd say, like, open your mouth like a little fish, and they'd open their mouths and pour the water in, and you would just see gray spots, black spots, holes, sometimes all black teeth. And it was really heartbreaking. And so we started talking to the parents and the teachers and asking, what's wrong with these kids' teeth? And it seems like it's a combination of they don't know how to brush, they don't know to brush, they don't have a toothbrush, they don't have toothpaste. Their diet isn't something that would promote dental health. The water they're drinking, there's not enough fluoride, and there's not any fluoride in the water like what we get here. And so we've gotten really interested in doing as much as we can to help, which is to provide them with toothbrushes and toothpaste. And then in Jordan next week, we're actually going to be having, in addition to all the workshops we usually do, having a health and hygiene workshop. So talking about hand washing, but also dental health. And telling them, you're going to get a toothbrush. We've got a lot of like Dora the Explorer toothbrushes and SpongeBob toothbrushes. You're going to get a toothbrush at the end of the day. You're going to get some toothpaste, and this is what you need to do to go home and take better care of your teeth. So that's the end of what I have up here. These are just a few links to info about Project Al-Islam. We're really active on Facebook if you're interested in that. We post a lot on Facebook and have a website that's just really getting off the ground. There's not a lot of info there yet, and we can be contacted on Facebook or Gmail. We always have an Indiegogo campaign up and also accept donations through PayPal. So, anyone have any questions? Yes.
In that article you sent me about BBC News, there's one thing that was really disturbing but understandable, is that many parents who have fled, they take out their anger, frustration on their children and beat them up. Did you see that in the camps?
So the article he's referring to is that about 3 days ago, I think, the BBC News magazine published online an article about the Project Al-Islam workshops from a year ago, from last March. And it's really long-form journalism, and it's a really excellent description of the workshops. I haven't witnessed any of that. I know that it happens. We have a lot of parents who come when we run the workshops, and they'll stick around during the day. And I've always seen a lot of loving parents with their kids, but you're right, that does happen. Because the parents have also suffered trauma, and similarly, there's no resources for the kids. There's also not any resources for the parents to be going to counseling or seeing a therapist or anything that we would do in the U.S. if that's what we have been exposed to. And I have a friend who lives in Damascus, and she does really amazing work. And she's helped get blood bags across into to help the rebel side or the soldiers. And she's helped get insulin and other medical supplies, and she's gone to cities that are under siege and help get food into them or help get medicine into them. And she has so many just heartbreaking stories about awful stuff that's been happening in Syria. And she's the confidant for a lot of people who've gone through a lot of trauma. And so she works with us when we run the classes with grad students. And one of the students said, "How do you deal with your own trauma?" And she said, "I'm not doing anything right now, because if I started, then I would just break down. That would be it for me. That's what my life would be crying about what's happened to me." She said, "Once the conflict ends, I'll figure that out. But for right now, I'm just keeping on going with what I do every day." Other questions?
So you're able to work inside and outside Syria?
Not me personally.
Your organization?
But yes, so Project Al-Islam has supported schools, and I think it's a school in Dara, I'm not sure, in terms of helping to fund them. Additionally, we have people who, through other work, adults that we've trained in conflict resolution skills who are back in Syria, who have told us that they're interested in running these workshops. So I think that this week or next week, for the first time, we're going to have these same workshops happening inside Syria.
And the government would allow you to be there?
It's just citizens there. It's people already in there. It's not us coming in from outside.
Or the Syrians?
The Syrians, they're doing what they're able to do. I don't think they're getting permission for it.
How do you get the bulk of your funding?
From fundraising, we have the Indiegogo site. And we use social media, and we, talk to anyone who's interested. And we've raised close to $100,000 in the last 2 years or so, all of which goes towards the kids. There's no staff, no one draws a salary. We don't, it's not an organization the way that Save the Children is, where if you look at Save the Children's financial breakdown, they have a good 30 or 40% of their budget is going to paying the people who do the work, which is important for that kind of organization, but that's not what our mission is. We're all people who have our own full-time jobs. Luckily, in my work, I already work with Syrians and work, in this context to begin with, but the other people who come and volunteer, some of them work in education or technology, or business even. We've got doctors and students coming, and they all buy their own plane tickets. They all pay for their own hotel when we're staying in Amman and then traveling to the
A
area.
regular citizen can come and join you and, that's good.
How big is the organization?
How big is the organization?
When you say organization, if you count how many members, because this many people, children, we talk about millions, how to manage that. So I know there's so many organizations, but your organization that you're with, how big is it?
So if you were to say staff members, and of course in the sense that I'm a staff member, it's not like that's my job, it's my volunteering, but I'd say 5 people involved in the actual operations of it, and then volunteers who come in and help us as needed. So next week in Jordan, I think we're going to have 30 international volunteers coming to Amman, and then maybe 20 or so people already in Jordan who have volunteered to help out. And so that's our staff member who's working with the kids. So it's
For
not-
that one event.
Yeah, for just that week. When we have the schools that we support, those schools already have their own staff members. And Nusha, who's the director of Amal Islam, she knows the principal, she talks to the principals regularly, she finds out where the funding need is. And so those schools operate independently, but we support them. And when we go to Jordan next week, we're going to be going to the school we fund and working with those kids there. But it really is just a bunch of people who have the ability to do this work. And luckily, we can all afford our plane tickets to get over there when we need to. So it's not an organization that has staff members with salaries. It's just a lot of volunteers.
Do you have to get a permit from the State Department, say we are going to go that place? Is it okay with you?
Not from the State Department. We've had State Department employees because I'm based in DC, and a lot of the people who work on this are in DC. And so some of our friends who have helped out are State Department employees. And the requirement is always that they have to inform the State Department when they're traveling abroad. And so they're allowed to go to Turkey. But last fall when we were in Lebanon, one of my friends who works at State sent in her request to be allowed to go to Lebanon. She was denied, so she couldn't come help us out. But in terms of us getting an approval from State to go over there, that's not the case.
So I was looking up on the website the other day, and it seems to me that I don't know if it's called sponsoring, or you take these trips with these kids, students, masters, whatever. Is it part of the curriculum, of the degree at George Mason University? Is it part of that?
It's not. So the way that Project Amal Islam started was that the place that I work, which is the Center for World Religions, Diplomacy, and Conflict Resolution, my colleague there, Nusha, was our Syria program officer, and she and my boss, who's Palestinian, who's the director of the center, traveled inside Syria in March 2013, went to Atman camp, and then said that they wanted to do something about it. So it came out of this work. But for us, we wanted it to be separate from George Mason University because GMU is a state school, and it's not the best for us to have that affiliation and then have their limitations on our ability to send money to support the schools that we support. So now Amal Islam, we consider it a separate organization. However, because I work here, my boss works at CRDC, and then Nusha, the director of Amal Islam, works for CRDC. We do still, we say we partner with them when we take the students abroad. So last week we had about 20 students, not just from George Mason, but also Georgetown University, American University. In the past we've taken people from other universities throughout the U.S. and they get 3 graduate credits.
They do get credit. That's
Yeah, they
what
get
I-
credit.
They do get credit.
Yeah, so when they go, they don't do what we do, which is the 12-hour day of just working with the kids. They have lectures with the professor. They meet with Syrian activists who talk about what's happening in Aleppo or what's happening in Damascus. And then separately, they have the volunteer work with the refugees, which occurs over about 4 different days. So they just finished up on Sunday, and they all flew back to the U.S.
What is the most fearful thing you have as a U.S. citizen walking in that part of the world? Because the Syrians are now, when you talk to regular American citizen, now you're in the South, the minute you say, I'm Syrian, ISIS comes to the border. 2-3 years ago, you talk Syrian, they think, victims and people of war, and, now it's a different story on the media.
Right,
Of course, part of what we hear on the media is true, but part of it is not.
right.
And as a U.S. citizen, what is your experience when you saw the real Syrian people on the ground,
Right.
firsthand?
Okay. I mean, I've never been, afraid for my safety or anything like that. When I was in Lebanon last summer, we had the 4 areas that we wanted to work in, and Nusha's uncle works at the UN, and she sent him the list, and he said yes, yes, no, yes. And so we changed the other area because he just thought that region wasn't safe. And the reason it wasn't safe was that the border had become a bit more porous between Syria and Lebanon. And although that's not an ISIS stronghold, there seemed to be people who were supportive of ISIS who might be trying to enter right there. But there's nothing that has ever happened to me that made me feel the least bit unsafe in Turkey or Jordan.